Hello, everyone. Catchy the Trinity with Catchy Gaming, and I ran into another first world gaming problem. My Nintendo 64 here uh, was having a bit of an issue just playing games in usual, where I had to turn the system on and off multiple times just to get the game started, which was indicative of the capacitors going out on it, which doesn't surprise me. The system's ancient by this point in time. And for anyone who is wondering, that phone number on the back of the Nintendo 64 is still the same number that Nintendo uses today for their customer service. As you can see by the version on the bottom of the console there, this was one not from the initial release date. Had to wait a couple months to get ours back when Toys R Us was still a thing, and you can put your name on a waiting list. The concept that took companies forever to actually re-implement. But that I decided I was going to do it myself. I'm pretty sure Nintendo wasn't about to help me do it either. Having worked a little bit with circuit boards and stuff like that, I decided to give a try at repairing my own console. In this case, just recapping it. So I had to do a different setup altogether to actually film parts of it. I had to convert a phone into a camera because my web camera is just a potato as far as I'm concerned. And they still sell the same camera. It's like 30 frames per second with a really low resolution. I was like, maybe not use that. So I found a way to turn my cell phone into a camera. So it started off pretty easy, taking out the security screws. I bought this one, or I should say, this particular security screwdriver to open up my Legend of Zelda cartridge to repair it, thinking there was something wrong with the board. It turns out there's just a piece of plastic that holds the board in place that broke. So yeah, just some glue, and a little bit later, it worked just fine. But I had part of the tools that I needed to get this thing undone and open up the 64. So when I did actually get it open, I was thankful that cockroaches didn't crawl out. I haven't seen it in my house, but I was still just like, oh, what happens if there are? But you can see by that top little plate there that something got into the console. And you can't see it here because the camera wasn't close enough, but there was a cobweb in there. The spider made its home inside my Nintendo 64 and just made a mess on that top plate there. It was kind of gross. So I got to work just doing some basic cleaning, picking out hairs and stuff like that. Nothing all that special. I used a sort of blow gun there to just give it a bit of a quick cleaning. But then I ran into a different problem altogether. And that was not actually having the screwdrivers needed to take this thing apart. I had tons of screwdrivers that I inherited from my dad after he passed away. Unfortunately, most of them are meant for auto work and stuff like that. Not so much taking a console apart. So, in order to prevent the screws from being stripped, I ended up having to stop and order a bit set that had a whole variety of attachments and stuff like that that would cover everything more than I need. So, if I do, I don't know, find a way to turn this into a living or something like that, I am somewhat prepared, I hope. And throughout this whole entire process, my assistant Trinity decided that she was just going to help, whether I wanted it or not. Okay, to be fair, the part where I set up my workstation for all intents and purposes was usually where her pillow is. So yeah, she was bothering me something fierce to get her spot back. So, like I said before, I never really done anything this extensive before. So I am absolutely new to this whole entire thing and not really sure what I was doing, but I was going to give it my best college try. After watching a couple of videos, I'm like, okay, let's do this. I mean, the one guy I watched had a pair of needle nose pliers, and I think he's being just a touch rough on it. So I did not copy him. I used a pair of tweezers and my soldering iron there to get the capacitors off. I also have a heat gun just in case. So removing the capacitors was a little bit simpler than I thought it would be. I just used the soldering iron and the pair of tweezers, added a little bit of force with the tweezers to make sure that it got bent up a little bit and didn't reattach to the melted solder. Easy peasy. After getting the capacitor off, all I had to do is remove the excess solder from the capacitor, which, is easy enough. You just add a little bit of flux, and then you take your desoldering wick and you heat solder up and you let the wick soak up the solder. Pretty easy, actually. I will admit it took me a bit to get it right, get all the solder off, because, like I said, I've never done this before, but I managed. And after I took that particular capacitor off, I decided I would just do all the other capacitors that were similar to it first in order to keep straight what I have and haven't done in terms of work. It really isn't that big of an issue. They were all various sizes, so it would have been easy to distinguish them from the others, but I was just being overly cautious. Now, I wish I could say I came out of this unscathed as well as the 64, but not quite. I was being clumsy and I accidentally burnt myself in this little shape that's a bit coincidental. And I melted a very, very small portion of the Nintendo 64 plastic where the controller's plugged in. You can't even tell that I did it unless you get really close to it, but that did happen. All the while I was sitting there pulling capacitors off, Trinities, still trying to help me. So after getting the first one out, it was just really easy. The learning curve on this was pretty small. Or is it shallow? Yeah, I can't remember. But shortly after that, one after another, I just started popping them off. It wasn't a big deal. Had to do a few things with my left hand versus my right hand, which is kind of how I got burnt. And I was definitely getting better at it. And fortunately, not damaging the board while I was at it. There we go. There we go. It wasn't 100% smooth sailing. Like I said, I melted a bit of the plastic. You can probably guess on which capacitor I did that on. And on top of that, a capacitor just outright broke. I did not melt the solder. I melted the plastic it was seated on. And so I had to get that off. That wasn't too hard. Obviously, I managed to get the piece of plastic off. Now, when it came time to start soldering on the capacitors, it was a bit of a mess, and I'll admit a shit show on my part. I just made an absolute mess of the first one, accidentally adding way too much solder, having to take some of it off, and even get a big old glob off of the capacitor, hopefully not frying the capacitor when I did it too. I was like, oh. So after that first one, I went and rewatched a video, and I came back with a much better technique. Although I did risk my fingers a little bit here and there because every time I try to use the tweezers to hold it down, I would just absolutely move it out of place. But all you have to do is you take a little bit of solder, you melt it at the tip of the soldering iron, and then you sort of just brush it along the metal contact on the back with a little bit of flux there, and that's all you need. And it made it super simple, and it made things go much faster. Here, I'll just play a little bit of me actually managing to get it done pretty fast here. And I actually did use the tweezers on this one, but most of the time I did use my fingers. Still getting assistance from Trinity. I will admit that not all of them were on that straight. A lot of the times they would just move as I would try and solder them on, but they still made enough contact that it wasn't that big of an issue. Not that it mattered, because let me show you the reference image to make sure that I got the capacitors in the right orientation. If you look close enough, they were just put on there good enough. Better than me, but they were still just put on there with the sort of good enough kind of care. So after successfully managing to replace several capacitors, I just moved on with the rest. It was fairly easy after that point. I managed to get a pretty good learning curve going on, so I made it really fast to just get going. With that, I finally got all the capacitors replaced. So here's the after image of everything that I replaced. I think I did a well enough job. I'm pretty pleased with myself. So I did spend some time cleaning up the plastic and stuff like that, getting rid of any dust in there, which was just mainly in the bottom. I also cleaned the heat shields and stuff like that to get all the bug parts off of them. Although that top metal plate that had the most stuff on it, like there's like these little black lines that look like insect legs that I couldn't get out. It's like they got melted into the metal, or maybe they're just stuck in the coating. I don't know. I don't know if they are actually insect legs or just a debris or something that got into the metal. I don't know. I tried cleaning them out a little bit. I started scuffing the metal with plastic, so I just stopped trying to mess with that. But when it came to putting all the screws back, I had to stop and find a different video because the video I made it stopped recording for some odd reason. So I had no idea where all these screws went, even with my reference image. And as you can see here, that's that little plate I was talking about where I cleaned off all the bug bits there. And so it's all nice and shiny. The dust is gone. All the screws are in place, or I'm actually in the process of putting them back in place. I did accidentally strip one screw, and only one screw, which wasn't that big of a deal because I just got a bigger bit, which allowed me to put it in the rest of the way. But it was the only one that gave me any issues that I accidentally stripped. With that, I put the case back on. I flipped it back over. I put all the security screws back into place. Nothing hard about that in any capacity. I'm actually kind of surprised how simple this board really is. That's when it came time to test it. I hooked my fancy USB cable converter up to it, power supply, all that other fun stuff, controller, Trinity helping again as usual. And then I chose a game that could potentially be a sacrifice if I messed something up or something didn't quite work right, which was Winback, which I also have on the PS2. So it wasn't that big of a deal if this one got fried, mainly because the PS2 version's better. And that's when I hit the switch.
Hold on to your butts.
And when I did turn it on, it took a second, mainly because it just has to do its thing, but it powered on. First time. I mean, I probably should have captured footage to show you what it did before, but it worked. I officially replaced the capacitors in my Nintendo 64. And of course, Trinity helped. Except I wasn't satisfied with just one game turning on, and I do need to do a little bit more extensive testing by playing it for longer bits of time. But I popped in another game, and it worked. No problems. The game didn't fry. I was pleased with myself. So I tried another game. This time I grabbed Smash Brothers, put it in, hit the switch, and nothing happened. I was like, oh no. Did I do something wrong? Did something not work? Did it fail after just a couple of minutes of being on? I was just absolutely devastated. And then I blew the cartridge out, as well as the inside of the Nintendo 64, just in case something got in there as I was sealing it up. And success. Smash Brothers successfully loaded. No issues there. And then I tried with Star Fox 64, and nothing happened. I actually started to panic after a minute there, like, oh no. Did the capacitors do something that made it incompatible with certain games? It turns out I just needed to clean all the cartridges as well. So they got a little bit of alcohol to clean out all those contact points for the pins inside the console. And after I did that, no issues. All my games worked. I successfully repaired my Nintendo 64, which has kind of emboldened me to maybe try and repair some other things. I mean, it's not the first thing I've repaired. I've repaired my Wii U controller. I had to replace the screen. I've replaced the Nintendo 64 analog stick, the GameCube stick. I've replaced analog sticks on the GameCube as well. The controllers, not the GameCube itself. In my black GameCube, I suspect I'm going to need to replace the laser at some point, so that'll be a fun time. And I have a laptop that needs a new connection port for the power supply, so that'll be fun as well. Anyways, I don't know. Name something you wish you knew how to fix without any real issue, or maybe something you wanted to learn to do in order to fix something. And just in case, Perfect Dark does work. I'm gonna let that play. I had no idea. It was like the one game that didn't immediately start up after I cleaned everything, but eventually worked. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.